I am Captain Spawn, and this is day 346 of Spawn Year. It's hard to imagine I've made it this far. Fewer than 19 days remaining. I know I've been endeavoring to limit my writing to just the reviews, but I just can't help myself. I thought Doomsvent said we had a deal, and if it stands, I'm looking at the end of the tour. I don't know how I've done it, but I'm proud of what I've accomplished here. What is left for me to prove, dear reader? After all the self-discipline I've had to amass to survive here, I will probably never say the word procrastinate again. Anyway, time is marching on, so I'd better get to today's review. Issue 200 was, at least at the story level, indefensible and reprehensible. I didn't enjoy it, I never believed it, there won't be a refund, I'll never go back. But 201 is a bold departure from McFarlane's incomprehensible expository ramblings. He is his own worst enemy. Whenever he's writing, it's like he's whistling in the dark, and it was really time for a new creative team, or at least a more competent writer. Just looking at this issue alone, Will Carlton and new artist Simon Kradansky are delivering something a lot closer to the shadowy, street-level horror book he says he wants it to be when he's not polling the audience and fishing for sales. Todd, I'm sorry, but this is where the party ends. I can't stand here listening to you. Why didn't you keep helping with plotting in the background and give these guys the reins in the first place? Maybe I wouldn't have spent the last 2 weeks climbing the walls. Carlton's pacing is more deliberate. It's still slow but purposeful, and there are still a lot of words. They don't all feel like packing peanuts, and everyone has a more distinct and natural way of speaking. And if you started with this issue, you'd never know McFarlane feigned amnesia, pretending all that back history never happened, except for what he wanted to pretend happened. The world suddenly feels more consistent and whole, almost like a proper reboot. And even though I'll still have to fake believe a lot of things aren't in continuity that were never sufficiently addressed, it's easier to jump into what looks like a reimagined Spawn universe, and I don't feel as much like I'm expected to be a part of a museum of idiots. This take feels like the pseudo-realistic approach McFarlane couldn't pull off before, like he was out of ideas, and these guys clearly see the potential in McFarlane's setup for Downing, which I'll admit was a cool idea. A Spawn who becomes a celebrity healer and gets famous before he even figures out where he lost his mind, left somewhere behind, even if I did feel like I was 1,000 years old by the time that premise was fully introduced. This issue is mostly two scenes taking place in different time periods, intercut between each other, to examine the two sides to Downing's emerging double life. The public celebrity miracle healer and the shady secret underground persona, Spawn, trying to navigate the treacherous activities of the cosmic and supernatural forces trying to control him when darkness has descended over everything in town in order to discover his origins. He's finding that being awake is swimming around in a lake of the undead, and the undead are like a bunch of friends that demand constant attention. Downing finds that his new public persona is a liability that makes it easier for his enemies to find him and put his girlfriend in danger. Bet he never knew love could be like this when one of Blood's henchmen, disguised as a cop, picks him up under the pretense of hearing about his amazing good deeds and wanting to give him a lift. So the vampire cop takes his Bloodmobile and delivers Jim to Blood, who's got a fang, actually lots of fangs, and knows a lot about Patient 47 and the secret experiments some shadow government was conducting for science. He has a briefcase he claims contains everything Jim wants to know about himself, and withholds it from Jim to use as leverage to force him into a life of servitude. Jim's not having any of it, and tries to take the case, but before he can say, "I am not your broom," Blood disappears and Jim has no way to commence with his revenge. All this backdoor scheming and manipulation, various factions trying to get their hands in Jim's puppet head, has suddenly gone from drawn out and unengaging to a little intriguing, mostly because the major players, so far, have revealed themselves, their goals, and because there's a concrete answer to Jim's questions out there for the taking, if Blood isn't bluffing. So Jim has a clear mission now, and Carlton is promising A, that he's going somewhere with this, and B, that the secrets are worth keeping me in the dark about. Of course, I can't trust the new guy just because he's not McFarlane, and if it weren't for disappointment, I wouldn't have any appointment. But I was much more involved with the story here than I have been. The A story is Jim on a major talk show. He knows the host is exploiting him for ratings, which she's almost cartoonishly ruthless about during a commercial break, but he hopes someone will recognize him on TV and tell him who he is. Downing shows so much more initiative than Al ever did and demonstrates that he has a spine. If it were Al, instead of taking a big risk to get his life together and at least make himself more fun to read about, he'd sit in his throne, say this is Spawn territory, and stubbornly prattle on with no is no, no is always no, when I say no it means 1,000 times no. The shrewd interviewer manages to get Jim to pour his heart out. He admits that he doesn't know who he is and that he's not a hero because even if he has powers, he hasn't used them on purpose. Jim takes himself for granted, feels rejected and unwanted. He's ended up really sad. He is the self-called nowhere, and he worries that he destroyed a bond of friendship and respect between the only people left who'd even look him in the eye. The audience is mesmerized by Jim. The smell of love is in the air, and he even seems to be a bit of a hypnotist of ladies. No one ever calls the show, adding to the mystery of who Jim was, and he's experiencing a bout of hopeless, bleak despair, which describes how he's feeling all the time. Jim heals a boy with an ultra-rare condition that resembles ALS, but he was born with it. The mother tells a sad and touching story that may have felt laid on too thick, but read as plausible and genuine. She's divorced, works minimum wage, is out of money, and afraid her son, who's never been able to move and who she's tried to educate on her own, won't have a place to live. They'd need a crane to help them start to see a world apart from pain. Jim finally seems to have some joy in healing someone, and it's a little unnerving. He may be the worst hope of his generation. We've seen what Jim, influenced by the costume, is capable of. This is the first tangible humanity I've seen from him. For all we know, the real Jim is still just like Al. Is he insane? Is he bad? Does he wreck everything he touches? Is he a sociopath? It's still hard to swallow he'll ever be a sympathetic protagonist, but despite my doubts, I find that my head's nodding yes, though my legs are not following. I confess, I admit, I'm impressed. Signed, Captain Spawn.